Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Dark Tower YouTube. We are continuing our series on the Man in Black. We were calling this also known as, it's just who is he in the different books it's turned into, because this is now this is our fifth part or sixth part. I'm losing track. We thought it was going to be one easy episode, but we are deep in it now. So continuing on where we left off, the last time we talked with y'all about this, we were talking about who is the Man in Black in The Wind Through the Keyhole. And today we will be talking about who is the Man in Black in Wolves of the Calla and hopefully Song of Susannah. I think we can actually get through those two. I always say that and then we don't, but I think we have a shot of that today. So spoilers for the series. If you have not read the entire series, The Dark Tower, stop, turn this off, come back once you have. At Dark Tower YouTube, we're doing a deep psychological dive into the magic, mystery, and metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. My name is Michelle McHugh, and I am your host. And with me, helping me on this series, is the ever wonderful Ash. How are you today, Ash? And could you catch us up? Where are we? Where did we land with this dude last time we talked?
Yeah, I'm doing well. So with Wind Through the Keyhole, we see that the Man in Black is also the Covenant Man in this tale that Roland is telling. He is not necessarily good, but he seems like he's helping some people, helping Tim. So maybe not all bad. I think that it's just more of his like chaotic trickster kind of thing. He really likes toying with people. We also see a little bit more of his magic. We see him able to change size as well as appearance, which is something that he was either not able or not willing to do. Like in Wizard and Glass, like we talked about, he had stayed the same height with his glamours, and then in this one he was able to actually like change his height to be bigger and more intimidating. Yeah, I think that that's kind of where we left off. Do you have
Yeah,
any
I think that's
additions?
great wrap up of what we learned last time. And he's such an incredible figure, and it makes you think so hard about what Stephen King is writing and not writing,
Mm-hmm.
because all along we're like, oh, in Wizard and Glass we're like, oh, he can't change size, we know that about him. And Stephen King is just like, nope, you didn't know that about him. And we thought, well, then he couldn't do it, or maybe he can now, or he was hiding
Yeah,
it from people. Maybe he's been doing it all along and nobody knew because he was just that person and
yeah,
nobody knew that the Man in Black. So it's so
yeah.
incredible to think about all the possibilities going on with this amazing villain
Mm-hmm.
of the Tower series and other books that King has written.
Yeah, I will say also we did learn for certain that he is not Merlin because Merlin was a separate character. It seems like in Wizard and Glass King might have wanted to put those together, but then by Wind Through the Keyhole, he had decided that Merlin was going to be a good figure and separate from the Man in Black. So that is something that we did sort of try to definitively point down, but also, it's the Man in Black. If he wants to be Merlin, he's probably going to be Merlin.
True. Very true. And important to remember that for those of you who don't know, The Wind Through the Keyhole was written after book 7. We just put it in the order of the story, which is book 4.5, but it was written later. And so what we're going to talk about today, King actually wrote before he wrote The Wind Through the Keyhole. So when we're coming up with some of what Roland's experiencing, that it's just, again, super fascinating because what Roland knows is not necessarily what King has told us or what the other characters are telling each other. So we're just having a lot of fun seeing through the eyes of different characters, through King, through the whole series, through the other series, and it's a big old mess, but we're having a great time. So I hope you're having fun too. So let's get into the Wolves of the Calla. And there's not too much Man in Black action in this novel number 5 in the Dark Tower series. But King writes a lot about this character, the Man in Black, in his opening argument. So let's start by looking at what Stephen King is telling us, the reader, directly in the argument from Wolves of the Calla. And do you want to kick us off, Ash, with reading the excerpt?
Yes. So in the argument, King is referring to Walter and Martin as two separate people. He writes, catching the half-human Walter is for Roland a step on the way to the Dark Tower. And then he says, we learn of how Martin tried, when Roland was yet a boy, to see him sent west in disgrace, swept from the board of the great game. And then later says the final confrontation between Roland and Walter occurs near the Western Sea. So it seems like, at least in this argument, or in this part of the argument anyway, that Walter and Martin are being referred to as separate people, separate antagonists for Roland, and there was, Martin was sort of the before, and Walter was who we see in the Gunslinger, yeah.
Yeah, it feels completely separate. And so we say, oh, okay, Stephen King, we're talking about them separately. But within the very same argument, he says this. King writes, Stephen Deschain sends his son and two friends, Cuthbert Allgood and Elaine Johns, to the seacoast barony of Mehis, mostly to place the boy beyond Walter's reach. And that's very different than what he has told us in the past about why Roland was being sent west, correct?
Correct. He was sent west, we were told, directly from Stephen Deschain to get out of Martin's Road, out of John Farson's Road. And so we did talk about how that could either mean that those are two separate characters or that he was referring to them as the same person but with different names. Could be either, but now saying out of Walter's way, that's new.
And what we have come to know about, that Walter and Martin were the same, or at least they were once King wrapped up the series and revised The Gunslinger. He had decided that they were the same person. So here he's messing around a little bit with how he's using that name. So no, we have no answers for you. If you're looking to these videos for answers, we have none. So there's a big spoiler there. We just have information to share and try to figure out what it all means. And King continues. Do you want to keep reading? So the next part of this is still in the argument from Wolves of the Calla.
Yeah. Okay, so King writes, Roland rescues Jake, leaving the TikTok man for dead. Yet Andrew Quick is not dead. Half-blind, hideously wounded about the face, he is rescued by a man who calls himself Richard Fannin. Fannin, however, also identifies himself as the ageless stranger, a demon of whom Roland has been warned. As Roland and his friends recommence their journey along the path of the beam, they see disturbing signs. All hail the Crimson King, advises one. Watch for the Walking Dude, advises another. And, as alert readers will know, the Walking Dude has a name very similar to Richard Fannin.
Dun, dun, dun! I love that he's kind of being he's telling us straightforwardly, but still in a Stephen King kind of dramatic way there, that his flag is the same man as Walter, as Richard Fannin. So that's cool. We have the next part. Do you want to say anything else about that part?
I think that this is just sort of a neat little way to package sort of all that we were already like sussing out from the different characters and things in the actual novel. Now we're getting it outside of the novel from King himself. Like just telling us like, hey, all of these guys are the same.
Yeah, and it's nice to have that perspective in these arguments that open up the books. The King goes on to say, with the TikTok man dead, the real wizard steps forward. It's Roland's ancient nemesis, Martin Broadcloak, known in some worlds as Randall Flagg, in others as Richard Fannin, in others as John Farson, the good man. So they're the same, right? Are we back to them? These are the same?
Yeah.
And specifically the good man with Martin.
That is something that we weren't it had been hinted at, and other characters seemed to. I mean, some characters thought that they were the same, and then some characters thought that they were two different people. But I want to say this is the first like definitive proof that we have that he's for sure John Farson, because in Wizard and Glass, he was at least pretending to work for Farson.
Hmm.
And we again never saw Farson close up. None of the characters have. And so that, like, we were already like, that's weird. That's a little maybe mysterious. We should put a pin in that. And so I think that this argument, like, sums it up like, yeah, no, that's him.
Making us just look more closely at what we actually know about John Farson, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
And it's only through the eyes of other characters that are very unreliable narrators. And especially after we get the information that the Man in Black can change size. In fact, it makes us reconsider that whole thing. So, and I think we've talked about the language before, also known as in some quarters, and how that's even tricky language.
Yeah.
And is King doing that here? But he just told us that Flag is Martin Broadcloak, is Richard Fannin definitively, and so when he's using that language here, I don't think it's a tricky thing that he's trying to do, because he did just reveal to us that they are the same. The walking dude is the same guy, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, that should be the end of it, right? But no, of course not. Of course it's not the end of it. We have to get into the actual text now and look at what the characters are thinking about this man. And remember, they have a different perspective than Stephen King does. They're different people, and they've heard different things. And it's been through Roland at first. So Roland's description of this man is how they learned about him, and then encountering him themselves. They have their own experience now through at the Emerald Palace. They met this man, and then did they see him in the Maryland's grapefruit? I don't think so.
No, I think they
No,
just.
okay.
I think he was in the palace, and then he disappeared when Roland tried to shoot him with Jake's gun, and
That's
then
right.
the grapefruit was left for them.
That's right. All right, so picking up with, this is an Eddie's point of view. If you want to read this one, what Eddie is thinking about this man.
Yeah. So King writes, but after their confrontations in the Glass Palace with Jake's old friend the TikTok Man and Roland's old friend, Flag or Martin or just perhaps Marilyn, time had changed.
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
But also remember, King might not know either what he's doing with Marilyn at this point.
Yeah, this is much earlier, obviously, than went through the keyhole. And I think, I mean, obviously we can't say for sure, but the way that the wizard's glass was set up to also be called like Marilyn's rainbow and things like that, it seemed like maybe at this point Marilyn was still being considered as an adversary for Roland to deal with later on. But then later, obviously, King changed his mind about that.
Right, he did. And also, like we talked about last time, he still kept the door open for possibility about people getting these stories mixed up in legend and folklore. And there's a dark wizard and a light wizard. And do we have the story straight about who was doing what? And just like Ash said at the beginning of this episode, could the Man in Black have appeared as Marilyn? Of course he could, because he can change shape. So there's still some ambiguity there, but ultimately King showed us that there is a good wizard named Marilyn. But here Eddie is not sure, and probably King is not sure as well.
Yeah.
Next we get into one of my most favorite parts of the series. I say that about a lot of parts, but I love when they're getting to Doorway Cave and figuring out what happened there, and Father Callahan showing up there and the tape recorder. I love this section so much.
Mm-hmm.
So Henchik of the Mani is talking to Roland at Doorway Cave, and he's talking about when he found the tape recorder and when they found Father Callahan. So King writes, I don't know what Henchik sounds like, but okay. The voice from the machine spoke in accents like those of your Kamates, gunslinger. It said that we should come here, Jemin and I, and we'd find a door, and a man, and a wonder. So we did. Someone left you instructions, Roland mused. It was Walter he was thinking of, the man in black, who had also left them the cookies Eddie called Keeblers. Walter was Flag, and Flag was Martin, and Martin, was he Merlin, the old rogue wizard of legend? On that subject, Roland remained unsure. So what are we pulling out of there? Because there's a couple of little things, I think.
Yeah, I believe this is the first time that we see Roland himself say that Walter and Martin are the same person, as well as Flag. So that is important that, like, he reconciled those into being one person himself, just based on his own experiences and limited perspective. So that's interesting because that's sort of the first time we see that, and I'm assuming that that was set off by something in the Emerald Palace, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a big moment because Roland's been pretty unclear this whole time. Mm-hmm. We see the similarity there with Eddie on we're still not sure about this Maryland mm-hmm. man, and like we've said, that's probably also reflecting King. Like, who is that guy? But I don't know anymore. I don't think he's the bad guy anymore, as he was. Remember, all the way back in the unrevised Gunslinger, mm-hmm. Marilyn was the ageless stranger and was somebody that King was going to have to slay on his way to the tower. So definitely set up as a bad guy initially, but by this point in the series, not so clear to anybody what we're doing with that character anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Not clear to the reader, and also clearly not to the characters either, since they are questioning it. And I think, again, because this is someone with such strong, like, glamour magic, it is really hard for the characters to be sure, especially because, again, they don't get the view that we get from all these different perspectives. They're living their limited perspective. Yeah.
True. They only know what they're experiencing, which is not a hell of a lot to go on.
Yeah.
So they're doing great, all things considered, and trying to figure out what's happening, just like we are. All right, so we're going to move on, and we have the Man in Black meeting Callahan at the way station. So Callahan throws himself out the window in Sayer's office that's kind of the culmination of Callahan's story. And he wakes up in the way station just like Jake did. And that's fascinating because that seems to be the origination point of the death doorway. Yes. That's the second time we've had a character arrive at the way station after death as a doorway. That's mm-hmm. for a different episode, but just cool to think about that. Like, there's many doors in the Dark Tower series, and death is one of them. And this seems to be the destination point for death. Yep. I'm getting off track. Focus, Michelle. Okay, so Man in Black meets Callahan, and Callahan has questions, as we all would in this situation. Yeah. And King writes, Callahan asks in a dry voice, "Who are you? Where is this place?" The Man in Black sighed theatrically. "So much backstory, so little time," he says. "Call me Walter, if you like. Just noting that he's choosing that name to
Yeah.
present to Callahan. What do you make of that?
I think it's an interesting choice, especially because he usually doesn't seem to choose that when introducing himself to other characters. We did see him introduce himself to Jonas in that way, I believe. Um, and it seemed like there was some weird baggage around the name, like his smile dropped and things like that. So it is interesting that he is choosing to use that name here, and I'm wondering if it's like a respect thing, maybe? Like respecting what Callahan did. That is pure conjecture, I don't know, but that is sort of that's why I think he might have done it. Like maybe this guy deserves to know my actual name, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting to wonder why he chooses different names when he's introducing
Mm-hmm.
himself to different folks and in different iterations. And we mused at some point he doesn't even maybe remember his name sometimes. I think,
Yes, after, especially after dying and like waking up in a new world, he remembers the initials RF and sometimes MB and says, close enough, we'll do that one. And so that's why we get things like Richard Fannin versus Randall Flagg.
right. But Walter, as we'll talk about in the next time we record the Dark Tower, we'll get more on the backstory
Yes.
of who this man actually is, and that was his actual name
Mm-hmm.
when he was just a boy. So, but he's Walter to Callahan, whatever, for whatever reason, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
means. And next up, Callahan is remembering being sent to, he's telling his story and talking about being sent to Doorway Cave with Black 13, if you want to read this one.
Yeah. The man in black thrusts the box forward, opening it as he does so, and his hood falls back, revealing the pallid, snarling face of a human weasel. It's not Sayre, but upon Walter's forehead, like a Hindu caste mark, is the same welling red circle, an open wound that never clots or flows.
I found this interesting because we've never seen him have that.
Right.
It's kind of like the bad bindi dot. It's the bad one where it's
Yeah.
filling with blood, and it's a symbol of the what do you call them? The Taheen have this going on. I think does Sayer. I can't remember if
Yes.
Sayer does.
Yes.
I think he does, and that's why because Callahan doesn't know who this is. He's never
Right.
met the Man in Black before, so he recognizes this dot, this
Yes.
wound, bloody dot as trouble. This is this mark of a bad man. But
Yeah.
where is it when we've seen him in other
Yeah.
iterations?
We have never seen it. So the choices are either he has hidden it all this time with his glamour magic and is only choosing to reveal it now, or when he started working like with Sarah Moore, for whatever reason, had to get that done. We aren't told which it is.
No, and I think it's the only time we see that happening. So that's why we pulled that out, just because it's a different appearance that
Yeah.
we've seen anybody else. He's never showed that to anybody else.
No, and I do think it's possible that the Man in Black is a very impatient person, and he doesn't like having to explain things to people. He just wants to get in and out, like do what he wants to do and leave. And I'm wondering if that was his way of like communicating who he is affiliated with without having to go through like this long spiel or whatever. So honestly, having the wound itself could be glamour as opposed to, he could have just like put that on just to talk to Callahan just so that He didn't have to explain who he was or who he was working with.
That makes so much sense because we've never seen it ever before, ever again. We only see it right
Yeah.
there. And it backs up his words that he was just saying. So much backstory, so little time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Like, I
Yeah.
just want to mess with you now.
Yeah.
So that actually, I think, is supporting evidence for that idea, and makes a lot of sense that he just was like, oh yeah, I'm going to show him this, and now he gets it. He knows who I'm working with and what I'm about.
Yeah.
So I love that theory. That makes anybody else have a different theory? Let us know, because it's an odd one-off that we're seeing there with Black. And that's it for Wolves of the Calla. Unless we missed something, let us know in the comments if you saw something else happening in Wolves that we did not. That's all we could catch. There are some novels where he shows up a hell of a lot, and some novels where he's just not in there much at all.
Yeah.
Song of Susannah is up next, and we're doing great on time, so we'll get through this one for sure. And we'll move right into it. So this excerpt is when Jake and Callahan take Black 13 and put it into a locker under the World Trade Center. Ooh, whenever I read these, I'm just like, that's an interesting choice, Mr. King, because that didn't happen very long ago when he wrote these.
Yeah.
But that's a different episode. So this is Callahan talking to Jake, and King writes, Callahan nodded. The only thing is, well, you know where we are going, and you know what we're apt to find there. Vampires, low men, other servants of the Crimson King, maybe. Possibly Walter, the hooded man in black, who sometimes shifted his shape and form and called himself Randall Flagg. And that's Callahan talking to Jake, and we're kind of in Jake's consciousness awareness and what he's thinking of there. So Jake seems to know they're the same.
Yeah. With either like Jake's thoughts, possibly Walter, Man in Black, Randall Flagg, are all in there. So it seems like our quartet has figured out, like, at least with those specific identities, this is the same guy.
Which is great, because as we've been going through the books, we've been pulling out what they are thinking, just like we did here. And again, they don't have much idea at all.
No.
They just know this. Jake had encountered the Man in Black when he was hit by the car, when he woke up in the way station. But knowing him as other people had to come with time and experience. So he's there now. He's almost caught up to where we are, which is good for the penultimate book of the series. Next, we get to this is another favorite part of mine, where we get to read Stephen King's diary. And if you want to read us this excerpt, we get some new information about the Man in Black.
Yeah, so just to remind everyone, Stephen King is a character in the series as well as the author. So we are getting the character Stephen King's diary right now. He writes, Diary, July 19th, 1995, Turtleback Lane, Lovell. I think Flagg may turn out to be Walter, Roland's old nemesis. His real name is Walter O'Dim, and he was just a country boy to start with. It makes perfect sense in a way. I can see now how, to a greater or lesser degree, every story I've ever written is about this story.
Wow, that's a big diary entry.
Yep.
We get Walter O'Dim. That is the first time we have seen that name. We get a bit of backstory, and we also get this idea, which is not super related to what this episode is about, but how King is like, this is Roland's story is every story. They're all part of this universe. There's a big connection between all worlds, and that makes so much sense with what the Dark Tower is, or what he's saying it is, and just the meta-ness of it all is super cool. But what do you think about him calling this man Walter O'Dim?
Yeah, so like you said, this is the first time we get O'Dim, and that's O apostrophe Dim. Like, I guess with King, names are really important to him. We see that a lot. I mean, off the top of my head, I remember Jack Moore, his last name literally means death, and he was the pusher. There are, countless examples, but that's just one of them. But, so dim obviously would, in our world, refers to a lowering of light, which the Roland and his quartet and sort of all of the gunslingers in general are referred to as the white or light, sometimes as just being like a force of good in the universe. So it could be relating to that. And then we also get in Wizard and Glass, we learn from Susan that the dim is that feeling of having lived a thing before, aka deja vu. And we know that he is stuck in this time loop for however long until Roland gets his act together, basically. So I think it could be either of those, both of those, but it is interesting that that's the name that King has chosen.
Right. And there's a line that I love in the drawing of the three where Roland is thinking about how he doesn't know Eddie's name. We know Eddie's name, but Roland doesn't get Eddie's name for a while because he's inside of Eddie. He gets his brother's name, but he doesn't get Eddie's name. And it says, but that makes sense because names are secret things full of power. Mm-hmm. So that's just King expressing that idea through Roland and showing up all throughout these novels. Yes. I think also what you said, these two options for sure. And then also just the idea of dim as not quite invisibility, but almost there, and moving without being tracked, not having people know where you're going, moving like we saw in Wizard and Glass from one side of the room to the other, seeming to disappear, but perhaps just being dim. So that idea, which makes sense to this character, also could make sense to that name as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to move on to Miss Mia. And she has a lot of encounters with Walter, so we can move through what her experience was of this man. She is meeting with Susannah outside of the Gin Puppy Saloon in Feddick, and there's a multi-chapter conversation that goes on for a very long time, and we can't read the whole thing, so we're just going to pull out pieces of that are referring directly to the Man in Black in one way or another, and how Mia has seen him, what she thinks of him, and then what Susannah is interpreting or gaining from that as well. So we're going to move to Susannah talking to Mia. Maybe, but I don't understand any of this. Least of all, why you're rushing to this guy Sayre, when you must know he serves the Crimson King. Hush, Mia said. She sat with her legs apart and her huge belly rising before her, looking out across the empty street. 'Twas a man of the king who gave me a chance to fulfill the only destiny Ka ever left me. Not Sayre, but one much greater than he. Someone to whom Sayre answers, a man named Walter. This is an echo of the Callahan situation, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's also using the name Walter with Mia. I guess we're sticking with that one for now. And just an interesting note that he is, that Sayre answers to him.
Yeah, we get some sort of the order of operations in the whole situation. And again, we just went over this, but why does he choose that name for these folks and not for others?
Yeah.
But Mia gets his real name.
Yeah.
She keeps telling her story. She likes to have sex with men until they die. That's fun. Fitting for a Stephen King novel. And then she meets the baby Michael and realizes that that's all she really wants. She really wants to be a mother, to have a baby. Unfortunately, the Red Death, which is an Edgar Allan Poe story, the Red Death plague is unleashed in Fedek. Everybody's dying or leaving, and Michael and his family go as well, and Fedek is an abandoned ghost town, which we're seeing, I think, thousands of years later at this point. After a few centuries, though, the low men come back. They come to the Fedek Dogan, the Arc 16 experimental station. They're bringing the beds for the kids that they're going to steal from the Calla. And this is around the time that Walter comes to Mia. So she's been there for hundreds of years, thousands of years in this awful, desolate, deserted, spooky ghost town.
Yeah.
And this is her telling us what happened when he showed up. If you would like to read as much as, there's a lot here, but as much as you want to read and then pause.
Yeah. Walter came to me. What did he look like? Hard to tell, Susannah. He wore a hood, and inside it he grinned. Such a grinning man he was, and he palavered with me. Walter is, I suppose, what you'd call the Crimson King's prime minister. He often travels in disguise, and is known in other worlds under other names, but always he is a grinning, laughing man. I met him briefly, Susannah said, under the name of Flag. I hope to meet him again.
A couple of things in here. The first will be the last thing that we heard, that Susannah now also knows that he has different names, and Flag is Walter. So just like Jake we saw is with it and is getting, this guy goes by different names in different places. Susannah also knows that now. What else did we learn from that excerpt that's interesting to all of us?
Well, he's always a grinning, laughing man, which is, we see that sort of tittering laugh as his kind of calling card, no matter what he is looking like no matter what his face is, or who his face is, he's always laughing and just thinks everything is a joke. And so we're kind of seeing that here again with Mia. And then also, Crimson King's Prime Minister is a very interesting and new addition.
It's a new title for him. It's very formal.
And it's also... sorry, I was just going to say it's interesting that, like, in Gunslinger, I think both revised and unrevised, there's someone in between Walter or Martin and the Crimson King. And I think maybe that it was Marilyn and then changed to Legion. But now it seems like Legion might not be a factor, maybe?
Right, unless it's like our theory, it is Roland himself. We did a different video on that. He has to conquer something in himself. It's a metaphorical legion, or because we did another episode about how they're shadows to each other, that the Man in Black himself is legion in a way too, part of this whole host of demonic bad things that are going to prevent you from getting to the tower in the way that you need to. So well,
yeah, it's interesting because, like, I guess as from the casual reader's perspective, it's assuming that there is, like, for sure another step. And we're sort of seeing the same thing with the Crimson King that was in The Wizard in Glass with Farson, where we were told that Walter was sort of like below other people, and he actually wasn't. Like, the characters assumed that Latigo was higher than him, and he wasn't. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here again, is like, we assumed that there might be another step between him and the Crimson King, and that's not necessarily the case.
It's not true. And could that be the Man in Black setting that up for his benefit in some way?
Yeah.
That he wants to be flying under the radar in
Oh, for
Gilead
sure.
with Gabrielle and the gunslingers. He's the advisor to the gunslingers, but really he's doing all kinds of crazy shit right under their noses.
Yep.
In this very unassuming way. So he could be making stuff up about his place in the ranks, only to serve his benefit and for him to be more dim and sneaking around and getting done what he wants to get done.
Exactly. I was gonna say that too. Like, his name is Dim. He's making moves in the dark, basically, is that's where he thrives. He loves to play games and pull strings, and doesn't necessarily need the attention from that, as long as he can have his fun.
And in fact, the attention might make it harder for him to do that,
Yeah.
so that this is Mia saying, I guess, what you'd call the prime minister. But that's her assessment of it. But she, interestingly, she knows a lot about him. She knows more than our characters ever did at this stage. And she's saying she knows that he travels in disguise as other people. She knows that.
Yeah.
She also knows that he's known in other worlds under other names.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember that he tells her that in the text straight out.
I feel like the characters could maybe guess at that, just since they have been in multiple worlds and so has he. But I don't know if they knew that he would, like, sometimes go to worlds and use one identity only in that world, and then when he left, use another. I think maybe they thought that he was sort of doing the same thing that he's doing in Roland's world as everywhere else, which is just picking whatever disguise fits the moment best.
Right. And she knows some stuff here. She knows these things. She's telling Susannah, she's telling the reader, and we know that these things are true, which makes the character of Mia very tricky, because she does know things, and she doesn't want Susannah to always know the whole truth, because that doesn't fit her needs, because she's acting in very selfish ways as well. So we're like, she's telling the truth now, but is she telling the truth later? But King always gives us some indication of something in the other characters having a red flag go up about the way they heard that, or that sounded a little off, or I think she's lying. That's our clue that they are lying. Right?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so continuing on with this conversation between Mia and Susannah. And this is Susannah's response to Mia. After discovering your purpose and being trapped here by it, after seeing the wolves getting ready to store the kids and then operate on them, after all that, Walter comes. The devil, in fact. But at least he can see you. At least he can hear your sad tale. And he makes you an offer. This tells us just something more about the character of that man, which Susannah is putting together. And she's also very intuitive. She can see the bigger picture sometimes that isn't being explicitly spelled out. So she's sussing out what's really going on here and telling us about that. But I felt like this made a lot of sense just based on how we saw him operating with Gabrielle.
Definitely.
Did you feel like there was some kind of parallel there too?
Yeah, for sure. Just preying on weaker women, I guess, and not necessarily that they are weak, but maybe don't have as much power as, be that institutional or, anything else. Women that would like an easy out for something, and that feel unseen and unheard. And I mean, it's a classical like abuse tactic for like love bombing someone until they trust you, and then things start getting a little bit weird after that. And I do think also that it makes sense for Susannah to be the one to like suss this out, because yes, she is like the woman of the quartet and sort of can see those red flags, but also I think because of Detta, because Detta's whole thing was like luring men in with a false sense of security and then attacking.
Mm-hmm.
So she probably had a lot of guys doing this to her, and even though she was aware of it and worked around it and like manipulated them right back, she knows the tactics.
That's a great point. It's not just that she's intuitive and figuring out what happened. She's lived through this experience in multiple ways before she even came to
Mm-hmm.
Midworld. And just like everybody else, her psychic powers have only
Yes.
been enhanced
Yeah.
since she's been here. So she gets it 100%. She hits the nail on the head of what the situation is, and we know that that makes sense based on what we've seen of him too. And it makes us super sad for these women. It gives us some empathy for Mia. It gives us some empathy for Gabrielle. And
Yeah.
we get a lot more of that when we do win through the keyhole. And there'll be an episode at some point about how important women are to this story.
Yeah.
But just to say, these are women who did not have power in Midworld, but they were smart and capable and resourceful and they wanted a voice, they wanted
Mm-hmm.
some power, and we can appreciate that
Yeah.
as women living in the patriarchy and just saying we deserve to have a say too.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately sometimes the only way to get that is through a man who has power or seems to have power. So very sad, I think, when we think about the bigger art imitating life kind of thing here.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think, I mean, obviously, Roland's world, at least like with the baronies and everything, they were so patriarchal, more so than our world by far. Women had almost no power and were just neglected, really. I mean, we don't we don't see really most women having power. The most powerful woman that we saw was Rhea, the witch, and that is because she decided to seek a way to become powerful herself. And you know, she even said something about like nobody talks about forgetting the face of your mother, like because it's not expected. So yeah, it is really sad that like these women feel so unseen and unheard that they are latching on to anything they can to feel at least a little bit of power or even empathy.
We could have a great conversation about this because it's just making me think about poor Tim's mom.
Yeah.
And how she was just kind of like, I can't actually survive in this world without a man.
Yeah.
And here's one, and he sucks, but I'll die.
Yeah.
And she almost died with him, but she would have surely died without him, or would she? But that the feeling of that we can totally empathize with in this world of, I don't think they live in Midworld there. They live somewhere within this world, though, right? Or is it Midworld?
I'm not sure. Are we talking about
Went
for?
through the keyhole.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I think I'm not sure.
I
We'll
don't
have to
know.
look and see. I don't remember, but regardless, it's somewhere in Roland's world.
Right. Right. Okay, back to the story, but nice digression there about how we should have empathy for these women because it sucks to be them. Okay, so later, King is continuing to tell us about what has happened to Mia, and if you want to read what happened to Mia, what happened next to Mia.
Yeah. King writes, Mia had been taken into the ARC-16 experimental station. She'd been given a tour by the smiling, sarcastic, and undoubtedly frightening Walter, who sometimes called himself Walter of Endworld and sometimes Walter of Allworld.
New names that we have not seen before. So we get quite a few new pieces of his identity in Song of Susannah, Walter of Endworld and Walter of Allworld.
Yeah.
Which did, I guess he told her that was his name, or did she just figure it out, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's also interesting because in the palaver in the Gunslinger, Walter seems terrified of Endworld and says he doesn't even want to talk about what's there. And now he's potentially embracing not only that place but using it as his name. Like that's a big change. And that could just be as he's continuing to work with these people, he's just getting like more comfortable with it. I'm not sure. I feel like Allworld makes more sense because he's everywhere all the time.
Right, and really, to put in plural at the end of that,
Yeah.
Walter of all worlds
Yeah,
would
he's
make
everywhere.
even more sense. He is everything, everywhere, all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing on with this conversation, and I think this is it for Song of Susannah. This is Susannah talking to Mia about, she's heard the whole story, she knows what's going on, and she's trying to confront Mia about it. King writes, Mia, they're lying to you about your chap. You don't know that, so don't be hateful. I do know it. And she did. But there wasn't proof, God's damn it. How did you prove a feeling, even one as strong as this? Flag, Walter, if you like that better. He promised you 7 years. Saya says you can have 5. What if they hand you a card, good for 3 years of child rearing with stamp when you get to the Dixie Pig? Gonna go with that too? And there she's just calling him Flag Walter. Again, just doubling down on, she knows who this is.
Yeah.
She knows he's a liar.
Yep.
She knows for sure that this is a scam and it's not going to end well for Mia, and just trying to do her best. And does not succeed in that.
It's so sad because this is sort of like, even though we don't necessarily see the ins and outs of like Gabrielle's relationship with Martin, I mean, we see some of it, but we don't see a lot of it. The compromises being made that are just slowly chipped away and chipped away and chipped away until you have nothing less, like that is such a common experience for women, especially women in abusive relationships. And so it's, again, just sort of showing how patriarchal this land is and how manipulative and two-faced the Man in Black is, if you'll pardon the pun.
That's right. He sucks. Mia's screwed. Interesting there that Susannah uses the name Flag first, though.
Yes.
That's who she's going to call this man, Flag. I mean, Walter, I guess, but she goes to that first, so I think that's an interesting choice, too.
Yeah, I do wonder if... I think because in the Emerald Palace, they say, like, or whatever your name is now, and he says Flag, so I guess maybe she's going off of, since that was what he specifically said, but I don't know.
That was her encounter. That's who she met,
yes.
Or who she was told that's who she met. So, but yeah, I mean, every choice that King makes is intentional. And he
Yeah.
could have, that sentence wouldn't change if she just said, Walter promised you 7 years, because that's
Yeah.
what happened and that's what Mia told her. But King inserted that Susannah consciousness, identifying them as the same person and calling him a different name first. He didn't need to do that.
No, I think it's just, again, trying to sort of emphasize to the reader how, like, these are the same people, we're all on the same page, everybody knows it, not just the reader, now all of the characters know it too, and that's sort of how we're setting up the quartet as we get into the Dark Tower, like the final book.
I totally agree. Everybody's getting on the same page with this character that we started off not knowing much about at all. From book 1 through book 6 we're on at this point. And that is what we have for you for the Song of Susannah. So we did that in an hour. I'm proud of us. That was lots of fun. We definitely could not have done the Dark Tower book 7 in this episode.
There's just so much.
That's going to be the last one, and we'll have some. So we'll go through all of whatever we learn about this man in the Dark Tower, book 7, and then we'll have our final thoughts of putting together what we have gained from the entire thing, which for me, Ash, means I'm going to have to go back and listen to every episode that we've made and read through our notes and try to make this tapestry something.
Trying to remember how many pages our document is right now. It's so many. But
it's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's so much fun getting to just dig through and try to figure out and come to a consensus about who this guy is.
He is, again, everybody, everything, everywhere, all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? What conclusion can we draw? So I said we don't have any answers for you, but we do have some conclusions.
Yes.
And a theory on what is happening here and what King wants us to think is happening here. Mm-hmm. So stay tuned for that last episode of this series, and then we'll have tons more for you, because there's always tons to talk about when we're reading the Dark Tower for the 2nd, 3rd, 50th time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it. Anything we missed? Any other concluding thoughts?
So, we might draw a couple of like short stories as well for the next episode, just because like I know he appears in like Hearts in Atlantis for sure. Might just maybe pull that, but yeah, other than that, we are almost through with everything regarding this man's identity.
Awesome. Yeah, so exciting. Thank you so much for your help today. Thanks everybody for listening. Tell us what we missed, because we miss things, believe it or not. And every time we read this book, we find something else. Even when we go through the notes 50 times live, we think of something new. There's always something new here. So let us know what you think, what we missed. We always love to hear from you. Until we meet again, my beautiful Dark Tower friends, may you have long days and pleasant nights.